Hey guys, how are you doing? Today's video we are getting back on track with the curriculum timeline that we've been working on. Now, it's okay if you don't remember where we left off, but last time we left off, we had just got done talking about all the different judges that had been ruling in Israel, but then Israel was like, no more. We want to be like the other nations. We want to have our own king. And Samuel, who was the last judge and prophet, prayed to God and said, God, they want a king. And God said, I love my people enough to give them their freedom. So if they want a king, they can have a king. But I want you to give them a warning. And so Samuel warned them that if they had a king, the king was going to want to take their money. He was going to make their daughters servants. He was going to make their sons work in his army and fight in his wars. And so Israel was like, we hear your warning, but we still want a king. And instead of choosing a king, someone who was godly, someone who God would want for them to have as a king, they chose a guy with big muscles, and he was really tall and really handsome, right? They chose a man named Saul. But Saul didn't have a good heart. And so in today's story, we are going to talk about the person that God chooses to be king in Israel. So we go back to Samuel, and God tells Samuel, Samuel, you are going to help me find the king who I want to rule in Israel. And Samuel says, okay, where do we go? Where do we find this king? And God tells him, you are going to go to Bethlehem. Does that sound like a place that we know about? He says, you're going to go to Bethlehem to find a king. And you're going to go to a man named Jesse. And one of Jesse's sons is the king that I want to be king over Israel. And so Samuel packs up and he heads to Bethlehem. And when he gets to Bethlehem, he finds the man named Jesse, and he goes up to Jesse and he says, do you have any sons? And Jesse's like, well, actually, I have several sons. And Samuel says, oh, well, God told me that one of your sons will one day be king over Israel. So can I see your son so I can figure out which of the sons it is? And so Samuel says, sure, come on over. I'll let you see all of my sons. We'll start with the oldest. And so he brings out his oldest son. And his oldest son is named Elliott. And Elliott is this tall, lots of muscles, very handsome looking man. And right away Samuel's like, oh man, sure, this is the guy. It's got to be the guy. And God tells him, he's like, Samuel, what's wrong with you? This is the same thing that the Israelites just did with Saul. And God actually tells Samuel, he says, people look at the outside and think that they know someone, but God looks at a person's heart to truly know someone. And he says, this Elliott? No, that's not the one. And so Samuel says, sorry, Jesse, it's not him. Can we see your other sons? And so one by one, Jesse brings out his sons. And over, Samuel's like, nope, it's not the one. Nope, it's not the one. 7 times. Nope, that's not the one. And Samuel's looking around, he's like, well, don't you have any more sons? And Jesse says, well, I have one more, the youngest, but he's out tending to the sheep right now. Now, in case you didn't know, being a shepherd was not very prestigious. It was sort of like being a garbage man or being a janitor, right? People often think, oh, is that a dirty job, right? But remember, what did God say? People look at the outside, but God looks at the heart. And so the youngest son comes out from the fields from tending sheep. And he comes up and he's like, hey, Dad, what do you need? And Jesse says, Samuel, this is my son David. Is he the one? And right when Samuel looks at him, God's like, this is the one. And so it says that Samuel anoints David. Anointing is like taking oil and putting it on their head. And it was symbolic. It was a symbolic gesture to be like, you are the one that God has chosen. And so God chose David that day to be king over Israel. Now, it wouldn't happen right away. Obviously, David was still very young. But this is the person that God chose to be king over Israel because of his heart. And so what does that mean for us today? Well, I think it's really important, that lesson that God told Samuel. People look at the outside, but God looks at the heart, right? We shouldn't judge someone based on the job they have, based on what they look like. Maybe they're tall, maybe they're short, maybe they're skinny, maybe they're wide. That's not what God cares about. What does God care about? He cares about your heart, right? If you are following God, if you are loving God and trusting God, that's what God sees and that's what God cares about. So we shouldn't look at the outside. We should care about what God cares about, the heart. So I hope you remember that. Next week, we'll talk about when David meets Saul for the first time and does something pretty amazing. So that'll be next week. But that's the story for today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.